In this video, we're going to look at iteration, and we're going to look at typical GCSE questions that you might encounter on this topic. So our first example says, using the iteration formula, xn plus 1 equals 5 minus 2 over xn, starting with x0 equals 4, find x1, x2, and x3. So this is an iteration formula, and what it tells you how to do is it tells you how to work out the next x value. So in other words, we know x0, we're going to be able to work out x1. When we know x1, we'll be able to work out x2. When we know x2, we'll be able to work out x3, and so on. So we're going to start with x0 equals 4. So we're going to plug that in, substitute it in here for xn, and then we'll be able to work out our x1. So let's do that. So x1 equals 5 minus 2 over, and then our x0 value. And x0 here is equal to 4. Now, that's quite straightforward. We can actually work this out without a calculator. We could just do 5 minus a half and get 4.5. I do recommend watching the video on Corbettmaths on how to use a calculator to really help with these, because it just makes these questions so easy to do. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do 5 subtract 2 over 4, which is equal to 4.5. Now what we're going to do is we're now going to get this value for x1 and we're going to put it back in and work out our value for x2. Okay, so x2 will equal 5 minus 2 over, now we're going to put our value for x1 here, so it's going to be over 4.5, and when we do that we get a value of 4.5 recurring, 4.555, and so on. And that's our value for x2. And now we know our x2, we can put that in and work out our value for x3. So x3 will equal 5 minus 2 over, and our most recent answer, 4.555 reoccurring. And we put that in and we get the value 4.56097561. And that's it. So we'll find our values of x1, x2, and x3. Now this is a very straightforward iteration question. They've given us the iteration formula, they've given our x0, and we've just got to plug it in and get our values for x1, x2, and x3. Now, a typical iteration question that you might encounter in the exam might be a bit more complicated than that. It might actually give you an equation to start off with. You might need to rearrange it to give us an iteration formula, and then we'll be using our substituting in and getting our values, and they'll become an approximation to the solution to the initial equation. Let's have a look at an example and see what I mean. So our, example number 2. Example number 2 says, show that the equation x squared plus 3x minus 1 equals 0 can be rearranged to give x equals a third minus x squared over 3. Part B, we're then going to start with x0 equals 0, and we're going to use the iteration formula to work out x1, x2, and x3. And then finally, we've got to explain the relationships between the values of x1, x2, and x3 and the original equation x squared plus 3x minus 1 equals 0. Okay, so let's start off with part A. Part A, what we're going to do is we're going to rearrange the equation we've been given into this format. Now, whenever we're rearranging the equation that we've been given, there's going to be loads of possible ways to do this, and luckily at GCSE level, you'll know final format you want to get to. So we know we want to get to x equals a third minus x squared over 3. Now, because this is divided by 3 and divided by 3, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get the 3x on its own to begin with. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides of the equation, and that'll give us x squared plus 3x equals 1. And now I'm going to subtract x squared from both sides of the equation, and that'll give me 3x equals 1 minus x squared. And as you can see, I've got the 1 and the subtract and the x squared. I'm now just going to divide the whole equation through by 3. And if I do that, I get x equals a third minus x squared over 3. And that's it. These questions are usually quite straightforward, but there are loads of different ways to make x a subject. I could have brought the 3x and the minus 1 to the other side, or minus 3x and added 1 to both sides, and then square rooted. I could have divided through by x and brought over the things to the other side, and so on. There's loads of different ways to do it, but in the exam they'll give you the format they want you to get to. And that's it. Okay, part B. Okay, part B, we're going to use the iteration formula. Now, because we know the original equation, x squared plus 3x minus 1 equals 0, and we've rearranged it to make x a subject into an iteration formula, when we put our x0 in, and our x1 in, and x2 in, and x3 in, what you'll find is they're going to get closer and closer to a particular value. And that particular value will be a solution to our equation. It'll be one of the solutions to our equation. And that's what our x1, x2, x3 are. They're going to get closer and closer and closer. If I got x4, x5, they're going to get closer and closer to a particular value or a particular solution to this equation. If you do watch the video on Corbettmaths how iteration works, I talked about that in a little bit more detail. Okay, so we're going to start with x0 equals 0. So let's get our x1. x1 will equal, well, we're going to put our 0 for x0 into here. So we're going to do a third minus 0 squared over 3. And we'll do that. And again, even though we know this is going to be 0 and take it away from a third, we're going to get a third. It's quite useful to use your calculator to work these out because there's a bit of a shortcut we can do to work out all the other ones. And again, watch the video in Corbettmaths on how to do that. Okay, so my first answer for x1 is going to be equal to 0.3333 and so on. It's a third. Okay. x2, so we're going to put our value for x1 into the iteration formula in here, and we're going to work out our x2. So that's going to be a third minus 0.333 so on squared divided by 3. And when we type that into the calculator and press equals, we get 0.2962962929 and so on. Okay, so that's our value for x2. We're now going to put that into the iteration formula and work out our x3. So x3 will equal a third minus 0.29629 so on squared divided by 3. And when we do that, we get that's equal to 0.30406950016 so on. And that's it. So we've worked out our x1, x2 and x3, and these values are going to be getting closer and closer and closer to a particular solution to the original equation x squared plus 3x minus 1 equals 0. Okay, in part C, that's really what this is asking us about. It's saying explain the relationship between the values of x1, x2 and x3 and the equation x squared plus 3x minus 1 equals 0. Well, x1, x2 and x3 are increasingly accurate approximations to one of the solutions to the equation x squared plus 3x minus 1 equals 0. Okay, and our last example, example 3. So example 3, it's kind of similar. So part A is a bit new. It says show that the equation 5x minus x squared equals 2 has a solution between 0 or x equals 0 and x equals 1. Watch the video on change of sign on Corbettmaths for that one if you want to find out a bit more about that. Part B, we've got to show that it can be arranged to a particular format, similar to what we've done previously. And we're going to use x0 equals 1 and use the iteration formula 3 times to find an approximate solution to the equation we've been given. Okay, so part A. So we want to show that this equation has a solution between x equals 0 and x equals 1. Now what we're going to do is we're going to subtract 2 from both sides to begin with. When we're doing this change of sign, it's very important that you get one side of the equation to equal 0. So by taking away 2 from both sides of the equation, we get 5x minus x squared minus 2 equals 0, and we've got one side of the equation to equal 0. Now what we're going to do is we're going to let x equal 0, and we're going to substitute it into here, and we're also going to let x equals 1 and we're going to substitute it into here, and we're going to hopefully find there's going to be a change of sign. And if there's a change of sign, that means there's going to be a solution between x equals 0 and x equals 1. And do watch the video on change of sign to see that in a bit more detail. So when we let x equals 0, if we do 5 times 0 minus 0 squared minus 2, we're going to get that's going to be equal to 0, take away 0, take away 2, that's going to be minus 2, which is negative. We're going to let x equals 1, and that'll be 5 times 1 minus 1 squared minus 2. And well, 5 times 1 is 5, take away 1, which is 4, take away 2, which is going to be equal to 2. And as you can see, 1's negative, 1's positive, so we can say therefore there is a change of sign, therefore 5x minus x squared equals 2 has a solution between x equals 0 and x equals 1. And that's it. Okay, part B. Part B, we've got to rearrange it again. Now, if we look at this this rearrangement, it has x equals the square root of. Now, because it's the square root of, I'm going to focus on getting this x squared on its own. So I'm going to add x squared to both sides of the equation to begin with. That will give us 5x equals 2 plus x squared. I'm going to take 2 away from both sides of the equation to get 5x minus 2 equals x squared. And lastly, I'm just going to square root both sides of the equation. So x equals the square root of 5x minus 2. Okay, and part C. Part C says we've now got to use the iteration formula, which is the easy bit really, where we're just going to put 1 in, get our answer, put that in, and so on and so on. So we know that x0 equals 1. Well, x1 will equal, well, putting the 1 into the iteration formula, it's going to be x1 equals the square root of 5 times x1. What's going to be 5 times xn? Well, x0 is 1, so it's just going to be 5 times 1. Remember, just plug in the 1 in here, and then take away 2. And that will be the square root of 5 times 1, which is 5, take away 2, which is 3. So it's going to be the square root of 3, and that will be 1.7320508008, and so on. Okay, so that's our x1. So we've got our 3, so x2. So to get x2, we're going to put this value in here. So we're going to do the square root of 5 times 1.732 blah blah blah, take away 2. And when we do that, we get an answer of 2.58074 blah blah blah. And our last one, x3, so x3 will equal, again, to get x3, we just need to put a value for x2 into here. So that will be the square root of 5 times 2.580 blah 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 minus 2. And then that will give us an answer of 3.302 blah blah 08, but I'd write this all down, 0252. And that's it. If we were to do it again, we would get 3.80 and so on and so on, and then that will be our that's it. Okay, so that's it. We've gone for 3 typical GCSE questions on iteration, and if you want to see more on how it works, I recommend watching the 3 other videos. Thank you.